Good day, everyone. Welcome to our subject, Speech and Theater Arts. This is our first recorded discussion. For today's discussion, we will talk about the introduction to public speaking and emphasizing discussing the basic communication concepts. In communication, this is the process of sharing the meaning through continuous flow of symbolic messages. As you can see, it is self-explanatory, and we also understand and know the definition of communication. So basically, this is the imparting or exchanging of information, or we can also include the news and etc. So through communication, we can send or receive information through different channels. We have also here the communicator. Communicator is whether a sender or a receiver. So these are the participants in communication. When you are sharing or when you are receiving messages, or you are involving yourself in a communication, you are called a communicator. Next, a message. So this is a system suitable for carrying messages through a specific medium. So a message is what you are trying to give or share to other individual, and this is include the information in the communication. So this is what you are sharing, or this is why the reason there is a communication. Next is a code. So this is a system suitable for carrying messages through a specific medium. So we have the encode. This is put into code, and the decode or take out of a code. Next is the channels. So this is the specific mechanism used to transmit message. So this is whether a verbal or non-verbal or etc. So when we say channel, this is the what we are using. For example, the tools, or is it face to face, or are we it is also considered the pipeline. So the channel is also considered as the pipeline. So next is we have the medium. So the medium is a form of technology of transmission that determines kind of code used. So the medium is whether I am sorry, I'm just a little bit confused. So when we say a medium, this is whether you are communicating face to face, or you are television or web or phone and etc. that involves the technology. So when we say the channels, this is the pipeline that we use to transmit the message. So next is we have the noise. This is the interference with message. So we have the external or the physical or internal or mental and semantic or misunderstanding or reaction. The noise when it comes to external, this is we have problems with our physical, or do we have illness, or there is something wrong, are we hurt, and etc. When it comes to internal, this pertains to our mental capabilities or your mental health. For example, is are your emotions unstable for the past few days and you cannot focus on the communication. Next is the semantic. So this is basically the misunderstanding or the reaction that we give in the process of communicating. Next is we have the environment. So when we say environment, this is part of the context. So this surrounds and provides a basis for the meaning of message. So when we say physical, for example, are your surroundings or is your surroundings good or quiet, or there's a lot of people. Next is we have the temporal. So when we say temporal, this is the point in time. And then the relational, which is the existing relationship between the communicators, whether you are friends, you're strangers, or etc. Next is the cultural. So these are the language and behavior in the community where the communicators come from. Next is we have the what we call the feedback. So when we say feedback, this is check checks effects of messages. So the feedback is the return of the return or the effects or the causes of the message you are trying to imply to the other communicator. So we have two types of feedback. We have the positive feedback. This is keep doing what you are doing. And then negative feedback is change what you are doing. So just like evaluating our performance, our teachers or other people giving feedbacks to our performance, whether you are so good doing at this, you are bad doing at this, you better try another field or etc. So those are the things that we can consider feedback. So in communicating and in the communication, we have also what we call the feedback. So these are the 10 levels of the intimacy in today's communication. So number one is the Twitter. So we are very familiar with the social media platforms. So we have the Twitter, the Facebook status, the Facebook message, the email, and the text message. So these are the platforms that we are using to communicate with our loved ones, with our friends, and to other significant people in our lives. Next is number six is the IM, the letter, the phone, the video chat, and the talking. So this usually a face-to-face or on-time communication. So you communicate in a timely and on-time manner or in the actual manner. So for example, here, talking in a face-to-face, you talk and the other communicator also give you feedbacks. And also in a video chat, even though we use a technology, when you say something or you communicate messages, the other communicator also communicate other messages, and so on and so forth. So we have here the levels or the context of communication. So we have seven level of communication. So the first level, which is the crisis handling. So of course, this is the beginning of any communication. So the whether it is in interpersonal or most especially the interpersonal communication. Next is the second level relationship. So this is the interpersonal communication at second level. Next is we have the third level, which is the self-esteem and excellence, which is you are involving yourselves in a daily communication. So you can communicate to two or more people, or you can accommodate two conversations at once. And next, we have the fourth level facilitator influencers. So you are now involving yourselves in a small group of team communication, whether you are in friends or in a convenience group cooperation and etc. Next level, which is fifth, is the internal cohesion. So this is divisional or organizational communication. So your group become bigger and bigger as you level. Next is we have the formulate strategy. So you're now formulating a strategy for public or external communication. And next, the last level is wisdom and compassion, which is the mass communication. So you are now be able to present yourselves, you communicate properly, you know how to use the proper words, the proper statements based on the situation, and etc. Next is we have now, or let's talk about now about the communication universals. So in communication universals, we have what we call you cannot number one is you cannot communicate. So when we say you cannot communicate, that is a lot of communication happens at a unconscious level. So as soon as two people perceive each other, they start communicating. So any perceivable behavior, including the absence of action, has the potential to be interpreted by other people as having some meaning. So in other words, we communicate even when we don't particularly want. Next is all communication has content and relationship dimensions. So when we say content, this is the literal meaning or information. When it comes to relationship, this defines the relationship between the sender and the receiver. So let's focus on interpreting that every communication has a content. So not just a content, but also a relationship dimensions or aspects, such that the latter classifies the former and is therefore a meta communication. So a secondary communication about how a piece of information is meant to be interpreted. So for example, communicating with a friend is different than communicating with an acquaintance or stranger. When we providing a friend with feedback, you could use words that might be considered offensive, yet still have your feedback accepted quite happily. However, if you would use those same words when providing a distant colleague with feedback, it could be considered impolite and you might leave a negative impression with that person. So, similarly, being casually impolite with a friend when someone else is present could give a negative impression on the third party. The other person hears you from outside the relationship with your friend and may misinterpret the message. So this usually happens in our everyday life. Next is we have the um, features of relationship that get defined in message exchanges. This includes the liking, the responsiveness, and the control, and the trust. Next is communication is a series of punctuated events. So the nature of relationship is dependent on the punctuation of the partner's communication procedures. So in other words, the Watzlawick suggested that how good or how bad a relationship is depends on how the involved parties decipher each other's intentions, actions, or a way of communicating. So in this context, punctuation refers to the process of organizing groups of messages into meaning. So all parties involved structured the communication flow differently and therefore interpret their own behavior during communicating as merely a reaction on others' behavior. So for example, let's say that you have a conversation with a colleague. So the conversation makes you upset, but you do not tell them how you feel. So the next time that you see this colleague, you may act awkwardly or differently around him. So your colleague might then realize that you're upset about something. So you've punctuated your feelings with your behavior. So however, your colleague might think that you have recently become upset. So they might feel awkward because they think that you're upset for an unknown reason. So this in turn keeps you feeling up, upset. So in this example, the interactions create a cyclic cause and effect loop because there is no true dialogue that allows you and your colleague to see what is really happening. So by understanding this communication universal, you can break this communication loop. So um, for example, I'm the colleague and you are the communicator. So when we talk about the other day, I didn't think like what you told me and I got upset. That's why I felt awkward around you. So you might answer, really? I didn't notice that. What exactly made you upset? So this simple dialogue would act as a kind of meta communication to break the endless loop. So that is what we call the punctuated events. Next is communication is irreversible and unrepeatable. So this means very simple. So when you already communicated it and you already said that to the other communicator, you cannot reverse it. You cannot um repeat it again. So for example, the history. So you cannot change it. That's already history. So um same as the communication is irreversible and unrepeatable. Next is communication is culture specific. So different geographic location, different cities and communities, we have different culture. So in communicating, we have also our culture language or the form of communication. So there are always or often happen that there are the culture barriers when it comes to communication because for example I said to one of my colleagues that she is funny. One might misunderstood the term funny. It might sound sarcastic or whatsoever, but that's our culture. So you better check the culture specific, of course. You have to be culture specific when it comes to communication. So we have here the communication models. So let me just put what type of communication model is this. So let me just type it. So, okay, it's there already. Why it's not? Okay. So, number one is let's talk about the Aristotle model of communication. So the Aristotle was the first to take an initiative and design the communication model. So as you can see here, the speaker plays a key role in communication. So he is the one who takes complete charge of the communication. So the sender first prepares a content which he does by carefully putting his thoughts in words with an objective of influencing the listeners of the recipients who would then respond in the sender's desired way. So no points in guessing that the content has to be very impressive in this model for the audience or the receivers to get convinced. So the model says that the speaker communicates in such a way that the listeners get influenced and responds accordingly. So that is what the model is trying to say is the Aristotle model of communication. So let's take a look of the scenario. One will definitely purchase the mobile handset from that store where the salesman gives an impressive demo of the mobile. It depends on the salesman what to speak and how to speak in a manner to influence the listeners so that they respond to him in a way he actually wants. So, for example, purchase the handset and increase his billing. The next model is we have what we call the Berlos model of communication. So this takes into account the emotional aspect of the message. So the Berlos model of communication operates on the SMCR that stands for source, the message, the channel, and the receiver. So as um, under source is we have the different communication skills, attitudes, knowledge, social system, and the culture. In message, we have the content, the elements, the treatment, structured code, and the channel, we have the hearing, seeing, touching, smelling, tasting, and the receiver, communication skills, aptitudes, knowledge, social system, and the culture. So the between source and message, that is we encode, and in the channel and the receiver, we then decode. So let's start discussing about the source. So the source, in other words, also called the sender, is the one from whom the thought originates. So he is the one who transfers the information to the receiver after carefully putting his thoughts into word. So number one is we have the communication skills. So an individual must possess excellent communication skills to make his communication effective and create an impact among listeners. Next is attitude. So it is rightly said that if one has the right attitude, the whole world is at his feet. So there is actually no stopping for the person if he has the right attitude. Next is we have the social system. So the displeasure of the listeners once simply because the speaker ignored the social set of the place where he was communicating. So he forgot the sentiments, the cultural beliefs, the religions, or the religious feelings of the second party. Last is we have the culture. So this refers to the cultural background of the community or the listeners where the speaker is communicating or delivering his speech. Next is we have the message under the SMCR by Perlos model of communication. So in message, when an individual converts his thoughts into words, a message is created. So the process is also called as encoding. So any messages further comprises the following elements. Number one is we have the content. So this actually the matter or the script of the conversation. So it is in the simpler words, the backbone of any communication. Next is elements. So the speech must be coupled with lots of hand movements, gestures, postures, facial expressions, body movements to capture the attention of the listeners and make the speech impressive. Next is the treatment. So this actually the way one treats his message and is conveys to the listeners. So one must understand how to present his message so that the message is conveyed in the most accurate form. Next is the structure. So a message cannot be expressed in one go. So it has to be properly structured in order to convey the message in the most desired form. Next is we have the code. So this is your body movements, your language, your expressions, your gestures. So these are actually the codes of the message and have to be accurate, otherwise the message gets distorted and the recipient will never be able to decode the correct information. Next is the Berlus model of the channel. So all the five senses are the channels which help human beings to communicate with each other. Next is the receiver. So when the message reaches the receiver, he tries to understand what the listener actually wants to convey and then responds accordingly. So this is also called as decoding. So the receiver should be on the same platform as the speaker for smooth flow of information and better understanding of the message. So he should possess good communication skills to understand what the speaker is trying to convey. He should have the right attitude to understand the message in a positive way. So his knowledge should also be at par with the listeners and must know about the subject. So he should also be from the same social and cultural background, just like the speaker. So this is another model of communication. So we have the Shannon and Weaver model of communication. So this is the most popular model of communication and it is widely accepted all over the world. So the Shannon and Weaver model of communication simply proposes that a message actually originates from the person who gets the thought or has the information. So the sender is also called the source of information or the information source. So the information then gets transmitted from the brain to the mouth and comes out as a signal which then reaches the recipient after joining hands with several noises and other disturbances, as you can see here. So the recipient then further passes on the message to its final destination or other minds of other individuals. So let's take a look at the scenario. So Peter is working as a vice president, so marketing with a reputed multinational firm. He is currently heading Mike, who in turn is taking care of a small team. Peter wanted Mike to prepare an exhaustive report on marketing strategies, which can be employed to achieve the goals of the organization. He also wanted a detailed study on the company. Peon interrupted to take the lunch order. Finally, when Mike got the complete information, he in turn delegated the responsibility to his team members. He tried his level best to convey what Peter actually expected his team to prepare. At the end of the day, the team did prepare the report and submitted to Peter, but there are few errors which they rectified later on. Next is we have the Scrum's model of communication. So he emphasizes that the communication is incomplete unless and until the sender receives a feedback from the recipient. So Scrum believe that the communication is actually a two-way process between the first party and the second party. So by the way, the M stands for the message. So Scrum believe that an individual's knowledge, experience, and cultural background also play an important role in communication. So individuals from diverse cultures, religion, or background tend to interpret the message in different ways. So we have also here a scenario. So Billy to servant, please bring something hot for me to drink as I am suffering from sore throat. The servant brought him a glass of lukewarm water, but Billy actually wanted a cup of hot chocolate coffee. Hence, different interpretation by the servant. He was not on the common grounds with Billy and failed to understand his master's information. So it was neither Billy's nor the servant's fault, but actually the differences in both their backgrounds which was to blame. So to conclude, according to this model of communication, when the sender passes on the information to the receiver must interpret it in the desired form the sender wants and give him the feedback or respond accordingly. So any communication where the sender does not get the feedback, the communication is not complete and thus ineffective. Next model is we have the helical model of communication. So this was proposed by Frank Nance in 1967 to throw some more light on communication process. So Dan's thought of communication process similar to helix. So let me just give you an idea what is helix. So helix is a nothing but a smooth curve just like a spring which if goes upwards also comes downwards. So the helical model of communication was designed by Frank Nance, keeping the simple helix in mind. So according to helical model of the communication, so the process of communication involves from the very birth of an individual and continues till the existing moment. So all living entities start communicating from the very first day of their origin. So when seeds are planted, they convey the message to the gardener that they need to be watered daily and should be treated well with fertilizers and etc. So when a plant emerges from the seed, it also starts communicating its need for water, sunlight, and fertilizers. So the supporting the helical model of communication, the same also applies for animals, birds, fishes, and all living creatures. So we have here scenario 1. So the way the child is communicating to his parents that he is alive, absolutely hale and hearty and ready to face the challenges of the world. As the child grows up, he cries whenever he is hungry or expects something from his parents and sometimes simply for his parents' attention. It is again a child own way of conveying his message to the whole world. So when the same child grows up and starts going to school, he soon interacts with his parents, teachers, friends in the form of words. Now, crying actually gets replaced by words or his speech, but one thing which is common is the process of communication which existed since the child's birth. So we have also the scenario 2. An individual in his elementary classes learns to pronounce a particular word or react to a particular situation. So it has been observed that even though the child grows up, he continues to pronounce the particular word in the same way as he did during his growing up days, or for that matter, if the same situation arises again, he would under all circumstances react in the same way as he did in the past. The fear of the child when suddenly the light goes off at night, resulting in a complete blackout, is present in his younger days as well as when he grows up. So, the two scenarios again makes the helical model of communication clear. So, according to the helical model, as the process of communication moves forward, it also comes back and is largely dependent on the past behavior of the individual. So, here. So, the model believes that the communication process is just like a helix which moves forward as well as comes backward and is dependent on the behavior patterns of the past, definitely within some modification and changes. So as the child grows up, he does make slight changes in his past body movements or past pronunciation of facial expressions. So he makes certain changes, modification in his communication, and tries to get rid of the communication errors. An individual will definitely get less nervous in his teenage days as compared to his childhood days. Thus, a slight change in this behavior. So the helical model of communication understands communication in a broader perspective and considers almost all the activities of an individual from day one to till date. So it cumulates all the activities occurring in the complete span of an individual that affects the process of communication, which in turn goes forward and also depends on the past activities. So that's all for today's discussion. So I hope you learned something. And if you have questions, clarifications, and etc., you can chat it in our official group chat. So I want to remind everybody that I don't accommodate again personal message. So don't please expect me to reply if it is sent by personal message. So for your performance activity, answer the following questions. So this is consist of 60 points. Put your answer in the following comment section below by the following the format. So again, please put your answer in the comment section below of this recorded discussion by writing first your name, your block or your cluster, and then your answer. So the deadline of submission is on October 3, 2023, 8 o'clock p.m. only. So this is your performance activity. Explain the Shannon-Weaver model. So again, thank you very much for tuning up for today's discussion. So see you on lesson 2. God bless everybody. And by the way, before I forget, I will announce the schedule of your quiz. So please prepare your Google form. Make sure that your Gmail account is logged in to your Google form. So to avoid conflicts during the quiz. See you again, guys. God bless.